Recently, we lost a fellow traveler. Lee joined me for many a sports adventure from East Lansing to Ann Arbor, from Detroit to Buffalo, Toronto to Orlando, and even to Progressive Field. Lee was always game. This obstructed view is dedicated to Lee. Not much of a beer drinker, but he was always down for a rum and coke. We miss you, Lee, but now you have the best seats in the house. Cheers.
Welcome everyone to Stadium Journey's Obstructed Views, the show where a couple of guys in a couple of countries have a couple of beers and discuss a stadium somewhere in the world and their experiences there. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
And we are pleased to be with you here again tonight. Thanks for supporting us. Before we get started, please make sure to subscribe to the Stadium Journey YouTube channel, like the video, leave a comment if you want. We like the interactive stuff. The official Stadium Journey review of today's venue can be found at stadiumjourney.com, or the link is in the comments below, right down there. So let's get rolling. Dave, what are you drinking today?
Well, in my, as you know, I bought a cottage recently, and my cottage is in Wasaga Beach, and there's a small town outside Wasaga Beach called Creemore, and in that small town there is a brewery, and so today I have a Creemore Springs lager. So this is their classic, what they've had forever. And as most breweries, they're branching out, and they've got a few other things now, but yeah, that's what I got today. Creemore Lager.
All right. And as for myself, I actually have a beer that we have talked about on this show before. This weekend, I actually hit the road and we were driving through central Connecticut. So, of course, we stopped in Hartford at City Steam Brewery, and I picked up a Naughty Nurse Amber Ale. Naughty Nurse, there she is.
Nice.
If we were visiting today's destination, we might be drinking a Burning River Pale Ale from the Great Lakes Brewing Company, because today we are going to talk about Progressive Field, home of the Cleveland Indians. Before we get started, let's take a look at the stadium vitals. All right, so Progressive Field was built to be a replacement for Cleveland Municipal Stadium, which the Indians and the Browns shared, and which seated 80,000 people. Way too big for what the Indians needed, because even if you got a good crowd of 40, 50,000, the place was still half empty. So the original plan, I don't know if you know this, was to build a domed stadium on the site where Progressive Field stands now, that the Browns and the Indians were going to share. That plan fell through. So once they approved a sin tax on liquor and a couple of different things, they got the funding to build Jacobs Field, as it was when they built it. So, Dave, when Jacobs Field, which is now Progressive Field, was built, it was considered to be one of the best ballparks in the major leagues. But nowadays, it seems to kind of be forgotten about. Why is that?
Well, I think it's different in that post, Camden Yards, everything became, as our buddy Mark always likes to say, retro classic. All those retro classic ballparks with the green seats and the brown brick, and Progressive Field isn't that. It's a retro modern, definitely built for the baseball team and only the baseball team. No football there or anything like that, which is good. But it doesn't have that brown brick. It doesn't have. I think it has green seats, but it doesn't have that really focus on the outside facade looking like Ebbets Field or some of those really old ones. So it definitely doesn't get lumped in together with some of those ballparks. I think it's fair to say that Cleveland has a rep, which maybe at one point was well earned. You know, the mistake on the lake and the burning river and all that good stuff. But really, Progressive Field, Jacobs Field, it's hard for me not to call it Jacobs Field, especially because of what Dick Jacobs did in really, putting his stamp on this franchise, which, you're a child of the 80s, just like I was. Oh my gosh, were the Indians horrible throughout the 80s. They were like the worst thing ever. But to me, Jacobs Field, Progressive Field is the poster child for the ballpark that builds downtown, that refurbishes downtown, because that's what I think the goal was. And maybe not instantly, because it never happens instantly, but over time it really built that. And it was really the first domino to fall in the vast improvement of downtown Cleveland.
You are absolutely right. I've had the pleasure to visit Progressive Field several times, because when I take a road trip out west, Cleveland is just a great jumping off point for me, coming from the Northeast. And we've stayed downtown, and you're right, there's a ton of stuff to do down there. There's a ton of great bars and restaurants and hotels and attractions. You've got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just about a mile away. You've got First Energy Stadium, where the Browns play, is right next to that. You've got Quicken Loans Arena right beyond the left field fence. There's all kinds of great stuff to see and do in downtown Cleveland. We often talk about cities that are underrated, and Cleveland's a pretty big city, I think, but it's still pretty underrated. I don't think it's the mistake by the lake any longer.
No, and if Jacobs Field was like the first domino, then probably the second was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that really, really changed. And the Hall of Fame it's down by the waterfront, right? And the Science Center is there, and the USS COD, the submarine, is there, and of course First Energy is there. And it is a bit of a way from Jacobs Field and from where the Cavaliers play, the Rocket Mortgage Field House. Oh,
has it been renamed?
That's a tough one. Yeah. But in that surrounding area, and you're probably not going to want to walk down to the waterfront. It is a hike, a pretty big hike, but in that immediate area, there is a ton of places to go and eat and drink.
And there's a casino there. I didn't even mention the casino.
Yeah.
The Jack Casino is right there.
I'm one of these, when I find something I like, I tend not to stray from it. And like you, I've been to Cleveland a ton of times. The Winking Lizard.
I've been to the Winking Lizard, yes.
It's the Winking Lizard. And, back before it was cool to have a whole bunch of beers, the Winking Lizard had a whole bunch of beers. They always feature at least 100 imported beers that are available year round. And I distinctly remember the first time I went there. You get the placemat, which has the big, huge list, all of the beers, and you could do the world tour if you lived in Cleveland, I guess, because some of us foreigners to the city are definitely not going to pull off the world tour in a weekend. I don't think. Well, I hope not. Anyway.
I hope maybe in my 20s, but yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some good craft breweries right down near the ballpark. I think of we mentioned in the intro, Great Lakes Brewing Company, and their Southern Tier Brewery is there.
Right.
You've got your chains, you got your Wild Wings and all that crap. If you want to eat that, you got places like the Winking Lizard, which you recommended to me one time. I checked out and loved it. So yeah, I think that's where I'll be anytime I visit Cleveland now. But I've been to the Thirsty Parrot, which is another good place.
I think I've been there too.
There's no shortage of places, and there, if you go there before or after a game, it's a baseball crowd too. All the Indians fans will come downtown, have their dinner before or after the game. It's a great atmosphere. People talk about, Wrigleyville or Fenway being those classic baseball park neighborhoods, but Cleveland doesn't take a backseat to anyone in that regard.
Isn't it kind of funny? You brought up Wrigley and Wrigleyville and the Cubs. Isn't it funny how different the Indians have been from the Cubs. Like the Cubs were always like the lovable losers, right? They lost forever and ever and ever. And the Indians were definitely the losers, but I don't think they were ever the lovable losers. And
No,
maybe it was because of the nasty stadium they played in. But wow, my dad grew up just on the other side of the lake. So when he was a kid, he would get all the Cleveland radio stations, so he could listen to the Indians on the radio at night. And he always talked about the curse of Rocky Colavito. When the Indians traded Rocky Colavito, that was it. They didn't win since, and really until the '90s, like they didn't win at all.
right.
In the '90s, they made quite a run.
Yeah, they didn't even sniff any pennants or divisions or playoff spots
No, I
for all
remember.
those years.
Maybe you remember this. At one point, when the American League East was big, every year a different team won the division, and it came down to Cleveland, and they would have kept the streak going had they won. To the point that Sports Illustrated put Corey Snyder and Joe Carter on the cover, predicting that they were going to win. And lo and behold, I think they were in last. Something like that. It was pretty terrible.
And I think your point is absolutely right. Cleveland didn't have that lovable loser mentality. They were just losers. And I think the reputation of the city had something to do with it. I think the stadium had something to do with it. I don't know if you were old enough to remember or close enough to Cleveland to remember. There was a game with the Red Sox one time that got fogged out. This was in the 80s. The fog came in off the lake and postponed the game. And I just remember Oil Can Boyd saying, well, that's what happens when you build a ballpark right on the ocean.
Right. Oil can. Good one. But here's something that we don't often talk about. To me, Progressive Field is, and it's still, maybe I'm showing my age. To me, it's still a new ballpark. I think I kind of think of everything after, Rogers Center as a new ballpark, even though it's 20 to 30 years old now.
Well, it's going, yeah, it's 2094 it was built in, so.
But Progressive Field had a great renaissance. They came out of the gate gangbusters. The Indians set a major league record for most sellouts in a row, 455.
Yes,
455 straight sellouts.
Yep.
5 seasons in a row, all of their tickets were sold before opening day. That's amazing.
Incredible.
And then they lost to the Yankees, I think, one year in the playoffs. They lost to, I believe, the Marlins in the World Series.
Jose Mesa.
Yeah. And then they kind of fell off.
Right.
And when they fell off, one of the things that they did, and Toronto Blue Jay fans are kind of hopeful for this because Mark Shapiro, who's the current president of the Jays, was kind of behind this whole Progressive Field renaissance. And they put a whole bunch of money in to take it to the next level. And I would say probably the biggest, best improvement is the Heritage Park. And that's in, I want to say center field.
That's in center field.
Right center field. And, for me as like I said, a child of the 80s and the Indians always being terrible, at least until like that Kenny Lofton, Charles Nagy kind of era, I had no sense of Cleveland Indians history. But you go there in Heritage Park and you really get a sense of Cleveland Indians history, not just like, oh, well, there were a lot of great players there, but they have a rather significant place in history. They had Larry Doby, who was the very first African-American player in the American League.
Right.
I believe it was both him and Satchel Paige together on the Indians became the first African-Americans to win the World Series. They also have Frank Robinson. Now think about this. You think Frank Robinson, you think the Reds or you think the Orioles, right? You don't really think the Indians. And really his tenure in Cleveland was 3 years. But, he was the first African-American manager there. And
Wasn't
they
he a player manager?
I think he was at the beginning, yeah.
Right.
But he, what they did is they really showcased this history that I think outside of real hardcore fans, you didn't know. and they've done a wonderful job displaying it.
And I think as the ballpark is aged, like you said, it's almost 30 years old now. They have continued to update it, and we have talked about ballparks being the right size. And when Jacobs Field was built, the capacity was, I think, 45,000. They've
Well,
actually,
when it opened up, it was about 42.
yeah,
But
and
then
actually it increased to
and then
45.
growing up, yeah.
But now, they've taken out sections, whole sections, to produce like a kids clubhouse and a play area and bars and social gathering sections, where now the capacity is actually only 35,000.
Mm-hmm. And that's a significant change. I mean, you're talking about 10,000 people. And if you look at, Cleveland's kind of a funny city. It seems to be almost like there's just not quite enough sporting dollars to go around, because the attendance for the Indians has dropped to where they're usually at the top of the bottom third in Major League Baseball. But what else has happened during that time? Well, the Cavaliers have, had their run with LeBron James, and they've gotten significantly better. I think the fans, football fans, realized what they lost when they lost the Cleveland Browns to Baltimore. And the Browns, it's still Cleveland's a football town. It's a Browns town. But with those sort of resurgences, I mean, the Indians' attendance has sort of taken a bit of a drop.
You're right, because the Indians have been contenders throughout the past decade. I don't think they've been elite by any means, but they've been solid playoff teams, won a bunch of division titles, and competed every year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Terry Francona has been over there.
They were in the World Series in what, 2016?
I think you're right.
Was that they lost to the Cubs? They lost to the Cubs.
Yeah, and a great series in 7 games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and you look at, even if you go to, this is where one of those things where, okay, so they have their retired numbers, which is really a who's who. We've mentioned a few of them. Lou Boudreau, also Bob Feller, Bob Lemon. One I don't really fully understand, but I'm not a Cleveland guy. Jim Thome, but I think the numbers are there. But then you go to the Hall of Fame, the Cleveland Indians Hall of Fame, which is quite significantly bigger. And they had like names like, Early Wynn and Bob Lemon and Satchel Paige and Mike Hargrove, Herb Score. They even had Cy Young. Now, when you could claim that Cy Young played for your team, that's some chops. That's some history there.
So speaking of history, I guess we'll mention really quickly, because this is, a big issue today, is the potential rebranding of the Indians with a new nickname. And part of the discussion has been, let's revert to one of those historic names from the past. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it'll work if they pick the right name. There are a few of them that, like, they were originally the Grand Rapids Rustlers, like in 1894. So you could call them the Rustlers, I guess. Or there's the Naps, but I don't think that works at all.
I don't think that would be an improvement over Indians.
Definitely not. The Lake Shores, the Broncos. I don't know if any of those fit. The one that you had suggested earlier, I kind of like, and that's the Spiders, which is very different from anything kind of professionally.
Absolutely. I think, and the marketing potential, the merchandising potential with the Spiders, I think would be fantastic. And it honors the team's history, but it's not old timey. Like if you went with something like the Naps, that doesn't make any sense in this century. But Spiders translates okay.
No, and it's been a slow progression, right? Like, I mean, a few years ago they basically retired the Chief Wahoo mascot, right. and this past year they've announced that they are going to retire the Indians name going forward. So I guess we'll see what they come up with, and hopefully it's something that works, and it's something that's good, and not. I hope they don't go kind of the minor league route. I don't think.
Right.
I don't think you can take a team that's been around since 1894 and give them like a really weird, outlandish minor league baseball kind of name, because I don't think that'll work.
Right. I agree with you totally there. And while you're at Progressive Field, I think this may be the only ballpark that has their own brand of mustard.
Ooh.
See, I wish we had our colleague Mark Viquez with us because he could rattle off the name of it. But there is a brand of mustard that you can only get in Progressive Field, and you can get it in the grocery stores around in the Cleveland area. But yeah, people swear by it. It's like a dark brown mustard, so it's really good stuff. I have had it. I did have to get a hot dog at Progressive Field just to try the mustard.
I believe it's called Stadium Mustard. Does that sound right? Stadium Authentic Mustard? I did a really quick.
That doesn't sound right, but it might be.
A really quick look. Maybe not, because it says it's manufactured in Illinois.
Yes, that would be it. Well, there we go. Bringing something up that we don't know anything about and bogging down the show.
Yeah. We'll have to cut that. So with Progressive Field, and we said it's kind of a retro modern as opposed to retro classic. One of the things that I find interesting about it is the exterior is that kind of steel girdered, kind of almost jungle gym like facade, where it's all the white steel in this sort of geometric sort of form, and it works. It doesn't, like, you don't have to have that brown brick and windows and whatnot. It's a totally unique look, and if you pulled down the sign that says Progressive Field, signless, you'd know exactly where it is.
Absolutely, it fits into the surrounding area perfectly. And yeah, it's funny to call something retro modern. That seems to be an oxymoron, but that's exactly what it is. And the mustard we were just talking about is called Burtman's mustard.
Okay, Burtman's mustard.
So that's our look at Progressive Field in Cleveland, Ohio. We look forward to meeting you there sometime soon. Cheers.
Cheers.